In this video, I'm going to show you what you need to build a successful team in Tower Fantasy so that you have a synchronization that makes the gameplay more easy and also much more enjoyable. Now, I personally believe every kind of combo that you have with a team should have a weapon that does shatter, a weapon that does charge, and a weapon that does great utility, or either some more like charge and more damage output, right? So what I'm using here is Tsubasa's Icewind Arrow, the bow, with King's Scythe of the Crow, as well as Nemesis's Venus. And for me, this is quite a successful build because it does everything I want it to do. It has 3 elements, which is quite rare for most builds in the game currently. Now, before I talk about potential builds that you can try using the weapons that you may have, I'm going to talk about what mine does over here. So I always start out with the bow, Tsubasa's bow, here to get my first proc with the ability skill, and we go straight into Nemesis and we do the skill over there. And then we can go into the Scythe of the Crow, use its special ability and its skill here to do a lot of damage, and you can see here we have the boss down 1 health bar already. Now, because the boss has a shield, we can immediately swap to King's weapon again, and we use the Scythe to whittle down that shield until it is gone. The moment it's gone, we can immediately swap over to either Nemesis or the bow again. Now, Nemesis, you shouldn't be proccing too many times because you do it once to get the pillar. Now, the pillar actually does like a kind of like a turret system. It's like has a lifespan of how long it's going to last in terms of seconds, and it shoots any enemy that is near it. Now, if you still use Nemesis while that kind of pillar is out, you'll actually end up gaining some heals at the same time. I believe even if you use Volt weapons, you get an extraordinary bonus if using another Volt weapon while using Nemesis, which we'll talk about soon. But ideally, the setup here is to use the bow to get the charge so that you can get the skill unlocked very quickly, to go into Nemesis to get the pillar there down that you can see there's zapping the boss right now. And then if the boss has a shield, or even for extra damage, you can use Scythe of the Crow, which does extraordinary DPS as well as shield breaking. It is a fantastic combo between Tsubasa's bow as well as King's Scythe. Now let's go have a look at some potential builds that you might want to use. Now, I am a free-to-play player, so I'm kind of stuck into using whatever weapons I actually receive, right? So for the fact, you know that I have Tsubasa's bow, Nemesis's Venus, and King's Scythe of the Crow. But ideally, if you're using Nemesis, there is a special trick with using Nemesis that if you look in its kind of elemental resonance here, Volt Resonance, increase the Volt attack by 15% and Volt Resistance by 25%, and all you need to do is have 2 or more Volt weapons. So ideally, you would actually swap Tsubasa's bow out for Samir's dual EM stars. Now, this is one of the most fantastic builds in the game. However, I'm just, not lucky with Samir drops over here, whereas with Tsubasa's bow, you can see here, I already have 2 stars into it. So that means I've got Tsubasa's bow 3 times already. Like, that's a huge increase for me. And every time you add an advancement to that, makes the weapon insane. So you might not be like able to just use whatever build you want, because you still might be getting other weapons that are getting more stars and advancements and making them way better than what any other weapons you might already be using. Unless you're paying to win, in which case, good luck with your rolls, I guess. But like I mentioned earlier, another good build is actually using the dual EM stars because of its high charge, has excellent AoE damage, going into Venus with its, special attack, and also its healing capabilities, which are fantastic for healing and dealing damage, putting down that pillar that nobody else can attack. In PvP, this thing is broken because people cannot attack it. So if you just keep your pillar up next to you and you just go on the defensive, people are going to end up dying to the freaking pillar, which is really irritating for people going up against a good Venus. And then Scythe of the Crow is just one of the OP weapons of the game that is really incomparable to a lot of the other ones. It's much like Venus, it's a weapon that you might actually need. Now, in a previous video, I talked about all the different weapons and what's good for what. You can actually go check that out now on the link on the screen, top right of the page of this video. You'll see there is a link to that video. But let's get into some specific builds. I want to start off with what people are using in PvP. Okay, so if we go look at the builds that people use in PvP, let's go start out with the number 1, 2, 3, and so on with these people here who are at the top of PvP. This is a bit of a different playstyle to PvE, but most often than not, these are probably the same weapons these players are using in a PvE sense as well. You'll notice that they all have the same kind of setup, right? So if we look at this one here, this number 1 ranked player on my server has a Meryl's weapon over here with the high shatter. This is the opposing weapon to the Scythe of the Crow. Also very good, very devastating devastating. It comes in the frost type, so it's a really nice weapon. It's a lot more tankier rather than the Scythe of the Crow, which has a lot more DPS burst and like, outputting damage with the flames. We have the healing charge weapon, so this player is going for a more of a tankier healing vibe. This is actually a really deadly combo to deal with, because this weapon over here, the Absolute Zero, is going to have a nice charge, so it's going to build up the ability for them to use Nemesis immediately after, which is your utility weapon, which also has heals. They have a heal charge weapon, and then they can go into Rosy Edge for the shatter and just the sheer defensiveness. This is a very tough combo to beat. This is a nice tanky build that you can try use. If we look at the number 2 player, let's see what they're using over here. Here you can see they're using the dual EM stars with Nemesis, with Scythe of the Crow, as we've already talked about, and this is one of the more successful builds that are actually in the game for just dealing damage as a priority DPS player who is capable of doing pretty much everything. In number 3, this player is using Venus again, which you'll find almost every single player using Venus, because this weapon is incredibly overpowered. It's very, very, very good, because it's really hard to compete with this weapon. And they're also using the same vibe that we saw from player number 1 with Meryl's Rosy Edge and the Absolute Zero trident thingy, I don't even know what to call this type of weapon, for the healing and the charge. You can see it goes charge, shatter, and utility. You see the combo here. There's always a charge weapon, there's a shatter weapon, and then there is a utility weapon, which in most cases is Venus. Let's try find one that doesn't have a different setup. Okay, this one here, they're actually using this for charge instead of the trident. They still have Meryl for the thing, and still Venus for the utility. Okay, so this is a very interesting one. This player is ranked, I think, what was this? Rank 5. They're rank 5 on the server. They're using a very odd combination of weapons that you don't see often. Now, this is a very interesting mixture. We have the charge from the dual EM star weapons from Samir. We have the Chakram of the Seas, which is also a really good, like, sub DPS, very, very good AoE damage if you manage to, like, pull off the skills and the spells correctly. It can be quite devastating. It also has a decent shatter. It's a nice filler weapon, I think, from swapping from dual EM stars into this. I'm thinking you're probably going to use this as the utility. The main spell that you're going to go first is you're going to be using this one over here, the Chakram of the Seas. And then they also have Huma, which is the Molten Shield V2, which is for their tanking, which is also, kind of, more of a defensey type weapon, but it's very, very deadly to deal with. Like, a good Huma player is tough to fight against. Now here's another build with this person now using Zero's Negating Cube. Now this one has an excellent charge. This one is fantastic with building up charge. I'm not sure what this person's idea is. Maybe they're trying to Zerg here. This is a defensive kind of weapon here, so you can see if this is more orientated towards PvP, because this thing, this weapon I believe has like a shield that it gives you, and then you have the dual EM stars, which is another charge-based weapon, and then we have the Absolute Zero, which is another charge-based weapon. So it seems like this playstyle kind of goes away from the shatter. So if they're going up against an enemy that has like shields, it's going to be quite rough. But I'm not sure in PvP if that is a huge issue, because with all these charges, this person's going to be popping off ability as frequent as they come. Like, they're just going to be casting ultimate attacks all the time. So you can also try that kind of combination. But in PvE, this is going to be rough because you have nothing to deal with like bosses with the, with those shields. You have to have something to break shields because your damage is meaningless without it. Okay, so here's an example, a build using Absolute Zero as their charge. They have Meryl with their Shatter, and instead of Nemesis, they're actually using the Thunderblades as their utility, and then kind of like mid-ranked weapon between the two. So when they build up their charge with Absolute Zero and their healing, they can go swap into Thunderblades to deal some extra damage, more as their sub-DPS kind of thing, as they swap between, tanking and healing, and then just having a damage. So this person is very kind of across the board here with, damage, healing, and tanking. So these are some DPS teams that we can look at over here. The first one is Samir as your main damage dealer, with Venus with your utility, and then King Scythe of the Crow using your shield breaking kind of antics, which we've looked at before as one of the main dominant teams in gameplay. Now, if you don't have Samir, you can also replace her with Crow or Tsubasa. In general here, you can see all DPS teams kind of use Nemesis and King. Now, you can swap this out for Meryl and maybe swap out Nemesis for somebody like Crow and keeping Samir and Tsubasa, but this is kind of your setup that you're going for here. Now, you have your Samir, Crow, and Tsubasa, as your main damage dealers in those DPS teams. So if you have any of those in abundance, like you have like a 2-star Crow, a 2-star Samir, or a 2 stars Tsubasa like I do, you're probably going to look at building a team similar to this if that's your focus for DPS. Looking at defensive teams, we have Huma, the Molten Shield V2. This is probably just the hands down like one of the best tanking weapons in the game. If you want to tank, use the shield. There's honestly no compromise to. There's no other tanking like main tank in this game currently, and you can swap this out with using either a Meryl or King for their shield breaking, or even throw in Nemesis for the little bit of that utility and healing, throwing out that pillar just so that you can add some extra damage while you're tanking and dealing damage to whatever you're fighting, while your team's trying to destroy it, while you're just trying to focus the boss on focusing on you, instead of like when I'm playing Tsubasa and all my single target damage is bringing aggro on me and I just keep getting my ass whooped. Now, if you feel like playing a support character, there are multiple ways to do this. One of the most common ones are Samir's main DPS for the charge to get up Venus's utility weapon, and then also trying to get up Zero's negating cube, which allows him to, give like a shield to everybody. So you have Nemesis with the healing, and because it's a dual vault, there's going to be a lot of healing. There's going to be a lot of extra damage from Samir. So this is a really strong support build. You're going to be doing a lot of damage and a lot of healing and a lot of damage negation. So this is actually a very, very good build to use if you have these 3 characters and you're trying to main them out. Alternatively, you can try using Shiro as your main DPS to kind of, try damage as much as you can. You got Absolute Zero from Coco Ritter to bring out your charge so that you can use spells more often, like from Shiro for your sub DPS to kind of like AoE damage, an area of enemies. And then Zero for his, damage negating abilities that help you keep your team from taking too much damage. And in a sense, these are the teams some people are using in the game. If you're using a specific team that's different from the ones we showed and works in a different way, let us know in the comments down below. But I'm pretty sure you probably have one of the teams that I've shown you here today in maybe one combination or another. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.